In this episode, we're going to reveal the magic of compounding. And even though we totally get how important and powerful this is, it even blows our minds to consider the huge impact it can make to your financial future.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit. The disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful concepts in property investment, and that is compound growth. Yeah, it might sound like a bit of a dry topic, but we assure you once we get into this, you'll see why you will also get so excited.
As we do. But before we get into that, what is your special house in the video behind you?
It makes me sick, this house.
It makes me sick too, actually. So if you're not watching us on YouTube,
My goodness.
ugh.
This is a house. Okay, if you're not watching, you'll get the idea. It's a tilt house that tilts and spins with the movements of the people that are inside it. And it's called the reactor.
God.
I think it looks like the Vomitron. Remember that from our young days?
Yep.
Now, the creators of the reactor lived in it for 5 days in 2016 as part of an outdoor art installation in New York. So, no, it's not a real house, but I guarantee this is not part of Airbnb's OMG category.
It's basically a seesaw house. So you can just imagine if you're walking around it, it's on a central post.
Like a seesaw.
And it would move. Oh my God. You'd just be too scared to move because like everything would just roll down one end, then you roll back the other. Yuck.
And as part of the art installation, the creators who lived in it for this 5 days, it's all glass. So you could see everything that they were doing.
Hopefully that middle sealed section is the toilet.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's why artists should not design houses. That's all I can say. All right. So we're on to compounding, and this is a really, really, really important topic, and that's why we wanted to bring a special episode on this. You know,
even to first home buyers, Veronica, it's not just an investor. It's not important to investors. It's important to home buyers as well.
All of us investing money in anything, right? So Albert Einstein, you know, remember that guy? I don't know. You might have heard of him. He once called compounding the eighth wonder of the world, and for good reason. Whether it's your savings, your superannuation, or the value of your home, compound growth is actually what helps build real wealth over time.
And we're going to today show you why it's cumulative, not just additive, and this will make sense. And why even a small difference in the growth rate can mean really big dollars down the track. Plus, we'll talk about what can erode your gains and how to avoid common mistakes.
And of course, we'll tie it back to buying your first home or investment property. So stick with us. This is all very relevant. So let's kick things off with a classic riddle. And, you know, the first time I heard this, I was like, oh, my God, it just blew my mind. Imagine a pond, right, with a single lily pad floating on it. And every day, that lily pad doubles in size. And by day 365, the lily pad is completely covered the entire pond. So it takes a whole year to cover the entire pond. So here's a question. on what day does it cover half the pond?
Now, I think most people would probably guess that it would be around sort of half the time, about 180 days. Yeah, it's halfway through the year kind of thing. But the answer is actually day 364.
That is
Right? That's mind-bending.
It's the 30th of December.
That's right. It started in January. Okay, so just take a moment to really let that sink in. It only takes one extra day for half the lily pad to double again and cover everything. And that's the power. That's the power of the exponential growth. It feels really slow at first. It feels like, oh, God, it's taking a while. But it's later in the stages, it's as time goes on that it really takes off like a rocket.
Just turbocharged. It's a snowball analogy that I love to use, right?
Yeah.
This is exactly what happens with property values. It happens with savings. It happens with investment returns over time. As long as you don't touch any of this stuff, like as long as you let it go, right? The early years feel very slow, but if you give it time, the results are absolutely massive.
Yeah.
So let's get into exactly what compound growth is.
We'll do a couple of examples because, I think for a lot of people who are logical, just want to tell me what it actually means. So a lot of people think about growth as linear. So if a property grows by $50,000 a year, it'll keep maybe growing by that same amount. But in reality, growth compounds because each year the increase is based on the new higher value. So, that's the remarkable thing. That's the eighth wonder of the world. So let's break it down with a really simple example, right? Say you buy a property for $500,000 and it grows at an average rate of 5% a year. Now, we're not saying that you go out and find that. We're just giving an example that round numbers kind of works well for us.
Yeah.
So after year one, you've got $500,000 property. After 365 days, it's worth $525,000, 5% on top of the $500,000. But after year two, it's worth $551,250. So it's grown by more than the 5% because it's compounding. Then after year three, it's worth, say, $578,812. Okay, so it's adding on top and then adding on top of the added on top.
So that actual amount of growth increases every year, even though the property, what you paid for at the beginning is the same and it's still 5%, but every year it's 5% of a larger amount.
Yeah.
Now, a little caveat here, properties, nothing actually, share market, properties, bank interest even, is never exactly the same every single year, right? So, this example might be, because we're saying it's average 5% per annum, it might be one year it's 3%, the next year it might be 7%, the next year it is 5%, then it's 10, then it's 1, then it's nothing, and then it's 5 again. That's what sort of happens over time, but they do sort of average out, right?
Yeah. Unless you're on a fixed term deposit.
Yeah.
That's going to be set, yeah.
Right. So notice this. Each year, the gain is bigger, as we mentioned. That's because you're earning 5% on a growing amount, as Meighan was explaining. And that is why wealth builds faster the longer you stay in the market. And it's also why asset selection is so important. You're not just buying any properties. What we bang on about, trying to get the best possible asset that you can get. You want something with the best growth potential over time. And there is something else that you need to be thinking about, which we will get to here. But that's the asset choice here is so critical to this compounding magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And now let's talk about something that actually blows people's mind. And I've done this exercise with investors time and time and time again. And it is the impact of just a 1% extra growth per year. So that comes back to asset selection, getting it out. Okay, so let's compare two properties. Let's say one grows at 5% a year, so using that example that we had before, and over 10 years, and the other one grows about 6%. So we've got one at 5%, one at 6%. Over 10 years, how much do you think that 1% difference makes?
It's phenomenal, right? A $500,000 property growing at 5% per year will be worth around $814,000 after 10 years, right? So that's a $314,000 gain. But after 10 years, if it grows at 6% average annual growth per year, it will grow to $895,000. So that's an extra 81,000. Yep. $81,000 all.
It's good to check these things.
I know, because I'm looking at the numbers. I go, we've done
check.
this, we've checked it. I've got that. What? That 1% higher annual growth rate, because you choose a better asset, actually makes a difference of $81,000 over that 10-year period. And so when you're buying your first home, you think about upgrading and how much easier your life is going to be if you've got a bit more to spend when you upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why good asset selection really matters. And we bang on and on and on about it, but it is important. Even though it's your home, if it's a stepping stone, it matters. If it's part of your retirement strategy, it matters. These things matter. A high property in a high demand location with strong investment fundamentals will perform or outperform an average one over time, and staying in the market for a long period of time, definitely important.
Yes. Now,
not everything compounds.
No, it doesn't. But also, I just sort of add in here that both Meighan and I have done case study after case study in our own areas. I've done case studies across Australia and across New South Wales and also in our local area to show that even in one suburb, not every property performs at the same rate over the same time period. So, we get sort of misled by a lot of headlines telling us that, properties in, median growth rate in this area has gone up by blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, well, yeah, the price of the middle property in the stack, that went up or down, but not every single property went up or down at that exact same rate. And there is a wide disparity in any location between the good properties and the ordinary ones. And so that's what we're trying to give you, that discernment to be able to sort of set that, work that through. And look, not everything compounds, as Meighan was just saying. There are some things that erode our growth. So let's go through the biggest ones. I'll tell you the first one. How's that?
And go for it.
Transaction costs, right? Stamp duty, legal fees, selling costs, right? So if you buy a property that you are going to outgrow really quickly, or it's in the wrong area, or it's, you've really constrained yourself because you were worried about keeping under a certain threshold to get a grant, for example, and you really can't hold that property for long enough to make sense, if you like, then you're going to be trading, and you'll be trading more often. So we want to try to avoid lots of transacting in property, really, because these costs can really eat into your returns. If you are constantly buying and selling, you're interrupting the magic of compounding.
Yeah. The next one, we've gone on and on and on about it, still going to go on and on about it, can't say it enough, is poor asset selection. So something that will erode your compounding growth potential is if you buy in the wrong location or pick a property with limited demand, your growth may be lower than expected or even be negative. And, sometimes you have to buy in a certain area because that's where work is, or that's where your childcare is, or the school, or whatever that case may be. You can still pick the best asset, not just an average asset, to achieve good compounding growth.
And the problem is a lot of people don't know this. They'll buy a property and they'll be none the wiser. And the only time it really comes home to roost is when they go to sell it. And then they're like, why hasn't mine gone up? Yeah. Like, why aren't I in the same position as other people, And that's a really painful time to have that realization, because it's too late. So we want to help you before you make the choice. The third issue here is impatience. This is what can erode compounding. Now, we know as a first home buyer, you are unlikely to buy your forever home now.
Yeah.
Right? So we get that you're going to have to trade at some point. But, impatience really does erode the magic and the power of compounding. Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett, everyone knows about Warren Buffett, probably the world's most famous billionaire investor. So Charlie Munger was his long-time business partner, and he said it best. He said, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily.
I just love how he put that.
Isn't that great? Don't interrupt. Let it do it.
Don't interrupt it. Let it do its eighth wonder of the world and continue to compound. Because the moment you interrupt it, of course, that's when you stop the magic of it.
Well, the lily pads stop doubling, don't they? That's really what happens. You interrupt it, I don't know to pull that metaphor even further. But look, at the same time, however, And this is the tricky bit. And this is where when we do strategy sessions for clients, we often have to look at portfolios of people who have actually bought properties that really you don't want to hold all properties. If you've already bought something and it's a lemon, holding on to that, sticking with that lemon can actually be just as bad, because if you realize you've made a bad investment, don't hold on to it just because you feel stuck. So
No,
and this
it's
is
intelligent to make those really logical kind of decisions around property.
if you've got a C grade asset, and you think, you know what, this is really not serving me, the quicker you actually do something with it, as in change course, better. So we're not saying you just stick with every single property, but when you choose well, let it do its thing.
And that's the opportunity, isn't it? If you have realised that, this isn't serving me as well as it could, and you make that decision, all right, I'm going to divest this particular asset and I'm going to reinvest in a better quality asset, better home or better location or better investment property, that is your opportunity to really educate yourself to know the difference between what you didn't know when you bought the lemon and what you should know now that you're educating yourself with podcasts and courses and so forth. You'll do much better in terms of your asset selection. So don't be afraid to say, no, this is not serving me well. I know much more now than I did back then, and I'm going to make the change for my own good. So the Psychology of Money has a great line about this, and that is the quicker it's done, the sooner you can get back to compounding. So if you need to pivot, just do it. Do it fast. Make a really good decision.
That is a great book. A really great book. I really enjoyed reading that. All right, let's
get back to first-time buyers though, Veronica. Now, how can you make compound growth work for you as a first-home buyer?
Okay, well, we've said it a million times, so we'll say it again. Asset choice matters. Pick a property in a high-demand area that will grow well over time, because that difference, remember, between 5 or 6% growth or 7 and 8% growth or whatever it is, could mean tens of thousands of dollars over a decade.
Yeah. And next, owner-occupiers will need to trade up over time. We understand that first-home buyers are probably not going to buy their forever home the first time. If it's a stepping stone, you are going to trade up. So your first home probably won't be your forever home. So think strategically about how you can build equity using compound growth.
Yeah. And we do have a little workshop, which is $39, called the Stepping Stone Strategy Workshop. So if you really want to learn more about that, then jump on the website and find it under the courses tab. Now, thirdly, the longer you hold a property, a good asset that is, the better. Selling too soon can interrupt compounding, will interrupt compounding, in fact. So if you can hold on to a property for 10 or more years, you are setting yourself up for some more serious growth. And particularly if anyone's buying, rent vesting and you're thinking about holding it long term, these are all things that you will need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I've got some really specific examples of this, which I won't go into in much depth, but we have a particular property in Brisbane that we purchased for some investors in 2007. They had a change in circumstances that meant that they had to sell it in about a 2-year period. I think they got out of it about the same money as they paid for it, just because of the timing of it. We bought that again for investors. Great investment property, long-term investment property. Those people decided that the growth wasn't happening at the rate that they wanted to and sold out of it. So despite the education and the knowledge that they had, they said, oh, no, we're just going to pull out a property altogether because it wasn't happening quickly enough for it. We purchased that property 9 years ago for investors again who are ready to divest. They had a 10-year strategy. They stuck to their 10-year strategy. And in that time, it's more than doubled. So it's gone from, I think, a $510,000 investment to 1.15 in that period of time. Now, they realised the gain, the magic of compound growth, because they stayed in it for the long term. Yeah. They stuck to the strategy and that property returned for them better than the average in the area.
Yeah, nice. It's sad for the first two.
It was, and against advice, but at the end of the day, we can only advise and you decide, and that's really, how good guidance works. So finally, if you invest in property, invest for decades is our advice. The biggest returns come later on, the lily pad that doubles at that last day.
Yeah.
So patience is really important.
And just imagine, that lily pad doubles in the final day. The next day, you're going to need a whole new pond.
I bet they didn't anticipate that when they wrote the riddle.
All right. That wraps up today's episode. If there's one thing that you take away from this is that time is your best friend when it comes to, value growth in property or capital growth in property. And remember, small differences in growth make a huge impact over time. It's amazing. At the time, it feels like nothing. But looking back, you think, oh my God.
Yeah, because that compounding, that magic of compounding is working for you. Now, have you joined our Facebook group yet? It's called Your First Home Buyer Guide Australia, and it's your opportunity to connect with us and ask us your questions. You'll get answers from us, which means you can be sure you're not getting led down the garden path.
And a quick note, you might think that we cover everything you need to know in these podcasts. A word of warning, we do not. We can't, right? We're just scratching the surface here. If you really want to be an educated first home buyer, you need to learn all of the steps and how to do everything in the right order. In fact, we recently interviewed a few of our graduates, people that have gone through the program and bought a home. And, it's interesting that a lot of them say, look, we've listened to the podcast and incredible learning, but when it came to actually doing it, I needed to get it all distilled and organised. And so that's what the course does for you.
Yeah, and it only costs $999. You get direct access to us to help you with your negotiations through Campfire. You can share links of any property you're thinking of buying, and we will help you work out whether it's A, B, C grade or an absolute no-go zone. And trust me, we do. We're quite direct about that.
Yep.
Trust me, you'll buy better with our guidance, and you'll overpay by a lot more than $990 if you do not know what you're doing.
Yep.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out Your First Home Buyer Guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you've found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.